temple. The work stopped short of its time when opposition came from the Samaritans. For 16 years, the temple remained unfinished. Then God raised up the prophet Haggai and said unto him, I want you to get the people back to building the temple. The people responded in the voice to the voice of God's man, and they began to build again. But after only 1 month of building, let me tell you what happened. Discouragement came, and they began to quit all over again. They were disappointed by the temple that they were building, and they were discouraged at the work that they were doing. Haggai writes to them and challenges them, saying, I encourage you to stay in the work. And that is a message I think we ought to hear today. A lot of folk have got discouraged. You listened to too much stuff that wasn't God. You've seen too much stuff that God had nothing to do with. Somehow or another, you shifted your view from God to everything else. And as we all go, and now there are times when disappointment looms over us like an impossibility, like it's too high, like it's impassable mountain that you can't go over. But let me tell you something. You got faith in your own self. If you are a believer, he said, if you can believe, you can say to the mountain, be removed, and that mountain will get gone. I'm disappointed because you're disappointed. I'm disappointed over the fact that you serve a God that don't believe that he can make a way out of no way. I'm disappointed that you don't believe that after being saved from your sins, that God has lost all power to do in you what he said he will. Oh yes, we got too many mountains that we build called disappointment. Well, what is the cause of disappointment? And I'm glad you asked me. The reason for disappointments are many, and most of them revolve around a bad memory. You hear what I said? Most disappointments come from a bad memory. Memory can be a blessing, and it can be a curse. The Jews were guilty of focusing on the negative and forgetting about the positive. That's what many of us are doing. You forgot the fact that when you didn't have no God, God saved you, but you've forgotten about that. For those Jews, memory has a heavy burden, and it has hindered their progress. Well, let's talk about the things they remembered. First of all, Haggai asked a question. He said, who is left among you that saw the house in its first glory? And Haggai prophesied in 520 BC. The temple was destroyed around 586 BC. And thus it had been 66 years since Solomon's temple had been destroyed. And certainly there were some people who were still alive in this second building. But the first thing that they did, they remembered its glory. And they remembered it had more than $20 million worth of gold on its walls. And now they were building a little old shabby building. And they're saying, sure, the splendor is not there. The good memory was that they had everything that they wanted to see that was breathtaking. They recalled the glory days when the Shekinah glory of God filled the temple, and the house of God reverberated with his praises. And the same people looked at the temple that they were building now, and it seemed like an embarrassment to them because it seemed so small and so shabby compared to the wonderful temple that they had been a part of. Yes, sir, and so it is. They were there complaining that it ain't as good as it used to be. These people look back and they remember the past. Remembering the past is not always a bad thing, but they chose to live in the past and stay back there until they weren't concerned about anything that was happening right now. Well, ain't it amazing? I see some parallels. There are some of you who still remember the glory days, the days when things were all right, because you can't bring yesterday here today, you're having a hard time, and now you're discouraged. Oh, I've been saved here now about 40 years. And I can tell you that the church of 2013 ain't like the church it was in 1974. But yes, sir, many things have changed over 39 years. But one thing I found out changed. Yes, sir, some of you have been around a lot longer than I have. And yet the church has changed. And you're worried about the fact, what are we going to do now? Well, we just wanted some things that we used to have. Now the stuff we have, we don't have an interest in. Well, memory is good if you remember the right stuff. For the Jews, memory became a curse because they not only remember the past, they chose to live there. And there are some of you dying from 1971. Some of you are dying from 1963. You're still living back in a place that nobody lives there but you. Well, when we hold a tenacious to the past, we refuse to serve God in the present, remembering the wrong things. And then there's another thing I want you to look at. Look at the things we forget. Yeah, this verse, in verses 4 and verse number 5, look at what it says. As a matter of fact, it says, even so, be strong, Zerubbabel. This is the Lord's declaration. Be strong, Joshua, son of Houze, the high priest. Be strong, all ye people of the land. This is the Lord's declaration. Work, for I am with you. The declaration of the Lord of hosts has said. As a matter of fact, this is the promise I made to you when you came out of Egypt, that my spirit is present among you. Don't be afraid. Now, ain't it amazing? I know what's wrong. You're stuck at the external stuff, but you forgot about the inside stuff, that God's spirit is still here today. Oh, no, you ain't got the same building you used to have, thank God. You ain't got all the people you used to have, thank God. But you still got the same God that was with you then is with you now. Oh, I wish I had somebody. Yes, sir, the things we forgot. We forgot about the fact that the same God that gave them the temple, the same God that brought them across the Red Sea, is the same God that we have right now. And the problem is you tried to follow him on something different than your faith. Oh, yes, and I want you to know many of us have forgotten faith. We got church in our mind. So much so until we don't have faith in our God. Ain't it amazing? Church got to flow a certain way before we feel anything. Certain things got to happen. Certain folk got to be in certain places as though there's people, it's others who give us energy. But our energy don't come from people. Our spirit, the Spirit of God gives us righteousness. They had heard the stories about God. The problem was the stories from their past had become just that, stories. They just loved to hear them. They couldn't help them, but they loved to talk about it. Yes, sir, how do you know a man getting old? He talk about what he used to do. Talk about what he used to could do. Yeah, well, what can you do now? He don't want to talk about what he can do now. Then God tells them, he's still here. I haven't moved. He said, my spirit remaineth with you. I am still here, just like I have always been. Well, let me tell you something. How has God been here and you've not seen him? Abraham is gone. Moses is gone. David is gone. Solomon ain't around anymore. The first temple is not there. But God say, I'm still here. What are you afraid of? Don't you know I gave Solomon the blueprint? I led Moses across the Red Sea. I told Abraham to leave and go find the place. I told David he could gather the material to build the temple. It's I who did every bit of that. And how is it that you're looking at everybody else and you don't see me? How is it that you got so stuck in seeing everybody else in this room, but you don't see the one that made it possible? Do I have anybody here? How is it that we miss God? How you got so disappointed over the fact that God can't take care of you as though that he has been incompetent over years? Let me tell you something. Because people don't shout out his name, it doesn't mean he's gone. Because people can't see his handiwork, it doesn't mean that he's not around. Because he has not shaken you to the point until a new miracle has been seen in your life, it doesn't mean that God is dead. No, God is still very much alive. How do I know? Because what you don't even recognize, God is taking care of you. He does it in such a manner that you can't even see him move. Every time you take a deep breath, that's God. Every time you're able to breathe in and exhale, that's God. If you don't believe it, stop by the hospital sometime. See what happens when God steps back for a moment. You recognize that the pain that you have in your body that you had on yesterday ain't here today. You laid down, and when you got up, you felt a little better. How did it happen? You see, God is moving when you don't even see it. Look at the comparisons problem that we make. God asked the people a question. How do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison as of nothing? The old people wept when they saw the new temple. And as they remembered the old one, in their eyes the new temple was less than nothing. It seemed that it was not worth their time. It wasn't worth their energy. And they hated it. As a matter of fact, they wanted nothing to do with it at all. I see people the same way. You still want the glory days, so you decide I ain't doing nothing in the church. You can't go bring back, no matter how you try, you won't bring an FM pulley. No matter how you try, you won't bring back a Gene Marble. No matter how you try, you will not bring back a Sister Avery Ray. No matter how hard you try, you will not bring back neither a Gene Marble, will you bring back a Jim Cochler? You won't bring back the old days. And everybody don't look the same. There were some people that didn't even know any of them. But you got to understand that the same God, if he worked with them, he'll work with these. Come on, where's your faith? After all, it wasn't man that saved you anyhow. When I got messed up in my sin, I didn't say, save me, Jim. I didn't say, save me, Gene. I said, save me, Jesus. You got to recognize the same God that they took to Calvary. Don't they killed him, got up and said, you got to do more than this. Because after all, can't no man take my life. I lay it down. Well, let me tell you something. What happened to your joy? If your joy comes from Christ, if your joy comes from Jesus, how is it everybody got you so disappointed? How is it everybody got you such in disarray? If it's God that woke you up, if he's the best thing that happened to you, why is it everybody makes you so sad? Why is it everybody has disappointed you? I know what's wrong. He said you ought to put your trust in God and not in man. Too many of you took it in reverse. You put your trust in man. Yes, the preacher let you down because he's still a man. Yes, they mess you down because you got to recognize you're